Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Vinny sent me a note out of Indiana about a repair to a problem we've had for a while. And it's happening all across the country, but one state here is stepping up and fixing this. And the governor has signed multiple juvenile justice bills into law. One of the bills addresses whether or not police officers are allowed to lie to children as part of an investigation. We've mentioned before that the courts have said that lying or misleading a witness, for instance, can be an investigative technique. So if you lie to the police, of course, you can get in trouble for that. But if they lie to you, they go, no, we were just investigating something and we thought we'd do this. And so one of the most common things, for instance, to do is if you catch two people and you think they're up to no good, you separate them. And the first thing you do is you tell subject A, hey, subject B just narked you out, said you did the whole thing. Then you go to the other guy or gal and say, hey, subject A just said you did the whole thing, narked you out. So you're going to tell me what you know? Or are you going to go down for him testifying against you? And so doing it to an adult is one thing. I think most adults can figure that out. But doing it to a kid, I have a problem with that. I really think that children who interact with the police and have a bad experience with it are going to grow up not really respecting the police. And as you know, they might not want to discourage respect. So the headline here from WFYI.org, Katrina Prost wrote this. Holcomb, that's the governor, Eric Holcomb, signs multiple juvenile justice bills into law. These will impact the state's juvenile justice system, including Senate Bill 415, which will prohibit the use of a child's statements if police lied to them. Under current Indiana law, if a member of law enforcement knowingly lies about criminal evidence, information, or consequences while interviewing a child, the child's statement can be used against them. But this bill will keep those statements from being included in court proceedings. The new law will not apply if police thought information they told the juvenile was true at the time, but is later found to be false. So it gives them an out there with a little bit of weasel room to say, oh, I thought that was true. I thought the other guy blamed you. It also does not apply to evidence discovered as a result of the child's statement. So it's not a poison tree thing, okay? So they can lie to you. Whatever you say to them, they can't use that statement, but they can use what they get from it. So it's watered down a little bit. But again, a step in the right direction. Throughout the legislative session, advocates and legal experts testified that police lying to children opens the door for more wrongful convictions. That too. Indiana law currently allows juveniles to consult with the parents before speaking with law enforcement, but supporters of the bill said that's not enough. In addition to discouraging police from lying to children, the new law also includes a requirement that police must attempt to notify parents if their child is arrested at school. Another piece of legislation aims to fix a gap between the juvenile and adult court jurisdictions. Currently, if somebody commits a crime as a juvenile, but charges are not filed until after they've turned 21, neither the adult court nor the juvenile court has jurisdiction over the case. The Indiana Supreme Court warned the legislature to take action last year after finding out this gap existed in a case called State versus Newcomb. Under Senate Bill 464, which is part of the package, if the crime committed while the person was a juvenile would have been waivable to adult court at the time, then the adult court would still have jurisdiction after the age of 21. If the crime would not have been waivable, then the juvenile court will have jurisdiction. In Indiana, certain offenses committed by a juvenile can be waived to adult court, depending on the severity of the crime and the age of the juvenile. A previous version of the bill would have put all cases in which charges are not brought until after the person turns 21 into adult court. Meanwhile, a senior staff attorney with the Indiana Public Defender's Council said it remains to be seen how a juvenile court will handle the prosecution of adults. We're going to have to figure out how to use the statute over the next several years. And as with any big legal change, I expect there's going to be difficulties applying it and potentially some unintended consequences. Holcomb also signed House Bill 1493, which eliminates costs and fees in juvenile court. Under the new law, parents do not have to pay for their child's defense unless the court finds that they are financially able to do so. The law will also apply if the Department of Child Services has custody of the child. So if you're an adult and you get arrested and charged with a crime, you're entitled to an attorney. And if you cannot afford one, one will be appointed for you. And so why they wouldn't have had the exact same law for children, I don't know. I guess they were thinking, well, the kids have got parents, the parents should pay. What if the parents don't have the money? Several other pieces of legislation that aimed to reform the juvenile system did not pass the session. The bills included one that would create a minimum age to prosecute youth, and another that hoped to overhaul the process in which children are charged as adults. So this is a fairly short piece, but it seems to me to be a good step in the right direction. I particularly like the fact that they say that if the police lie to a child during an investigation, the responses made cannot be used in court against them. And that makes a lot of sense to me. I've had some people ask, they say, Steve, you've mentioned before that you do primarily lemon law these days, but you've been practicing law for 32 years now. Have you ever handled any juvenile matters? Yes, I actually have. Somehow, in my long and storied career, the bulk of which has been lemon law and consumer protection, I've handled a couple juvenile matters. And I actually had, it was for a friend whose kid had some issues, and wound up going into juvenile court and taking care of those. And the strange thing was, it depends on where you are as to how scary that experience can be. And I remember going into one of these courts that's designated entirely for juvenile matters, and walking around in it, it felt and looked like a prison. I mean, it was like maximum security jail is what it felt like. And the hearing rooms were, these little rooms and inside this big block of just gray. And I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, luckily, I managed to avoid that kind of trouble when I was younger, okay? But I can see how that process would scare a child. And so I saw kids in there who had attorneys. I saw kids in there whose parents were with them and had attorneys. I also saw some kids in there who apparently didn't have their parents around, as far as I could tell. I don't know. And so it's one of those things that as an adult, trying to imagine what something looks like to a child again. I mean, we were all kids at one point or another, right? Theoretically. So you have to think back on that. And so imagine a situation where a kid gets picked up because he's near something that happened. And we've all heard these stories. Some kid does something stupid. There's a bunch of kids nearby. Oh, everybody starts running, for instance. Cops show up and grab a kid because he's running. Why are you running? I don't know. I heard something bad happen. I'm running. Didn't want to get picked up by the police. Well, I picked you up. Now that you're here, let's talk about why you're scared of the police. You must have done something bad. And then, of course, they picked up somebody else. Hey, do you know this guy? And they throw a name at you. And you might know the guy because he went to school with you or something. I've heard the name. Okay, well, he says you did it. And that's it. That's method number one. That's plan A when it comes to talking to kids. And by the way, they might not have picked up another kid. They can just say they did. So they grab one kid and start throwing names at him. You know this kid, this kid. Finally, they get lucky on one. Okay, well, he says you did it. Hasn't been picked up yet. Just made it up. And so it's a real problem to me. And I think that adults confronted with this should be allowed to make more hay out of it in a courtroom. And obviously you can, but the problem is that the officers on redirect are going to say, yeah, it's an investigative technique. We weren't really lying to you. We were simply asking you a variety of questions to see what kind of answers you would give. And so when, I said this to the defendant and it was a statement that was incorrect, I wasn't lying. I was simply probing for answers. And strangely, a lot of juries buy that. And a lot of juries don't have a problem with that. And so a lot of the things that we talk about on this channel, you have to talk about whether something is legal or not. Will the courts allow this to happen? Is it legal? And then remember, though, just because something is legal doesn't mean it's going to sway a jury. We've heard of stories before where a police officer gets up, tells a complete story, and the jury just doesn't buy it. That happens too. So whether something's legal or not is one thing, and how it's going to sway a jury is another. But the problem I have is, like I said, a lot of juries, when an officer's up there, especially like a detective comes in wearing a suit and a tie, like off of TV, CSI, and starts talking about the investigative techniques they use to crack this crime. Isn't it true you lied repeatedly to the defendant to get him to say those things? Well, we interrogated him and asked him some questions, brought him in for questioning. We question a lot of people. Question people all day long. I ask questions, he gives me answers. Somewhere along the line, he said X, Y, Z. Boom, he's guilty. But you lied to him to get those answers, didn't you? I was asking him questions, and so the real question is, how far is it going to go? But unfortunately, until more people become aware of this and really stop to think about it, I don't know that much is going to change. But it is a big step when it comes to kids. Because, and boy, I hate to sound like this, but it is absolutely true. When I was a little kid, my parents taught me to respect the police. And they told me and my brothers, if you ever encounter the police, you're polite, you're friendly, you respect them. They ask you a question, you answer them. If they tell you to do something, you do it. I don't ever want to hear about you having any kinds of issues ever with the police. Now, I grew up in a fairly small town in Michigan and did not have a lot of encounters with the police department. But along the way, I did meet some of them. And I mentioned before, I drove a tow truck, and we towed cars to the Birmingham Police Department. So at the age of 16, when I started at the gas station, and then 18 when I started driving the tow truck, I saw these cops all the time because they stopped by the station to check on a car that got brought there or talk to us about something we towed or whatever. And I met a lot of them along the way. And, I still at that point in time had a healthy dose of respect for them. And as I've gotten older, my view of the police has gotten a little more nuanced, partly because of what I know as a lawyer and partly because of how I've been treated in the ensuing years, because I'm no longer 18 years old. I'm above 18. So I do think that it's unfortunate if the police choose to lie to a juvenile during an investigation. So this does remedy that, but it remedies it in Indiana, along with some of the other reforms they've done with the juvenile justice system. So Governor Eric Holcomb has signed multiple juvenile justice bills into law in Indiana. Katrina Prost wrote that for WFYI.org. And Vinny sent it. Thanks a lot. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Every man has his follies, and often they are the more interesting thing he has got.